You're right there guys, this is Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft, and this is a guide to external airsoft attachments. Basically anything that can bolt onto the gun using a Picatinny mount. Now, whilst the reason for these is mostly cosmetic based, some of them do actually offer a practical purpose, so this is what we're going to be covering today. Note I'm not going to cover things like rail kits or stocks or pistol grips, anything like that. These are the things that you can universally attach to most airsoft guns. Now, this is a gun without any external attachments on it. This is my ASG Bren 05, and I've taken everything off it, including the standard included iron sights, just to show you what a gun looks like without any attachments. But with a couple of things attached, it now looks a little something like this. Now, as you can see already, it looks like it means a bit more business than it did with all the empty rail space on it. So going from front to back, we're going to talk about all the things you can attach onto your gun and discuss how you can customise, personalise, and maybe add a little bit of practical benefit on the side as well. So the classic go-to attachment is the suppressor. Now, in terms of real steel firearms, what it does is it captures the expanding high pressure, high heat gases that the gun expels when it fires a round. And it delays the reaction time between that mixing with the natural atmosphere, reducing the sound that the gun would make. This concept doesn't really transfer to airsoft particularly well though. Whilst it will quieten the sound coming from the front of the gun, it's going to do nothing about the sound from the internals, which if you're using an AEG, the loudest and most distinctive sound it's going to be making is coming from the gearbox turning, which even a foam-filled suppressor is not going to deaden the sound of. Most suppressors aren't even foam-filled at all actually, they're completely hollow, and you may question, well, what's the point of that? Obviously the cosmetics value speaks for itself, but they can also be used as hiders if you have an inner barrel extension. So say you want a longer inner barrel in your gun, but you don't want to get a rail kit, extended outer barrel, flash hider. Instead of getting all those, you can just get a suppressor, bolt it on the front, and it's going to hide the inner barrel extension. So aside from the cosmetic value, suppressors do have their uses. The counterpart to this is the amplifier. Now, these are essentially hollow devices that are just bolted onto the front of the gun, and the idea is to make them sound a bit louder. The theory behind these is maybe the guy using it likes the sound of a louder gun, maybe it makes it feel a bit more real to him. It also adds a little bit of intimidation value, so if you're shooting at people and they hear a loud gun, they're going to think it's more powerful, and so they might not want to stick their heads out as much. It does sometimes work like that. However, I tend to avoid amplifiers because the whole theory of drawing more attention to yourself runs counterintuitive to my general gameplay style, and the vast majority of them just sound like people have bolted a tin can on the front of the gun, and so it's not that appealing to me. Now, tracer units are extremely cool. The vast majority of them look and bolt onto the gun the exact same way as a suppressor does. But the difference with these is if you're using glow-in-the-dark BBs, as it leaves the barrel of your gun and enters the tracer unit, it detects the BB is there and releases a high-intensity flash of light, which charges the glow-in-the-dark BB, and as it leaves, it has a bright light inside of it so you can clearly see where the BB is travelling. Now, some of these keep the light contained within the unit itself, some leave the front open so that other people can see the flash as well. Makes it look like there's a muzzle flash going off on the inside of your gun, so if you want that cool factor and added realism, then the option is there as well. Some of them, however, aren't even suppressors. Very few of them are actually M4 mags, which has the flash within the mag itself, so it leaves the front end of your gun free if you want to bolt something else on instead. However, as I said, the vast majority of these are only M4 standard compatible. They won't be available for the vast majority of guns. Now, the advantage of having a tracer unit is that you can see exactly where your shots are going, especially in a low light environment. And if you've ever seen a night game where people are using tracer units, it just looks so cool. It's like something out of Star Wars with all these glow-in-the-dark BBs flying everywhere. Obviously, the drawback of this, however, is that if you can see where your shots are going, the people you're shooting at can see where they're coming from. So you're absolutely going to be the centre of attention, especially in a dark environment. If they suddenly see a trail of glowing BBs coming at them, they're going to know your exact location. Now, foregrips come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. The general function of these is to provide a more comfortable resting point for your offhand. So when you've got your gun shouldered, you've got a nice, comfortable, easy to control position for your offhand to go onto. Which one you use is very much up to personal preference. They come in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, price ranges. If you want a vertical one, if you want an angled one. Some people don't particularly like them at all and just find holding onto the rail or the magazine. Now, the only time I actually really think I need to be using a foregrip is if the gun's standard rails are a bit too sharp and so they make them uncomfortable, a bit like the Bren has here, or if I've got a lot of weight on the gun, so I've got a huge scope and my recording equipment, it can really add weight to the gun, and if that's the case, then putting a foregrip on it makes it a bit more manageable. It should be noted as well that some foregrips actually have more than one use. Yes, you can hang on to them, but some of them come with spring-loaded bipods inside them, or maybe they're part of a torch laser-like combo, so it's worth looking around to see one that's both comfortable and might also have a bit more functionality. Bipods are mounted to the front of the gun, and once the legs are extended, they provide a stable firing position for your rifle regardless of where you are. So say you're bunkered down in a position, you're up against a window ledge, deploy the legs on there and it's going to make the gun a lot more stable. It's going to reduce the natural sway that your arms would influence on the shot trajectory, and it just makes your groupings a little bit tighter. In reality, however, unless you're defending a position for an extended period of time, I don't really see the use of these. Because just resting the gun on the ground, naturally bracing it up against the window ledge by just the underrail itself, or just bracing it against a tree. As long as you've got the gun braced against something, it's going to achieve the same results. So I tend to find that bipods aren't to my taste, but some people definitely prefer using them. Grenade launchers are the giant shotguns in Airsoft. Each shell can hold anywhere between 80 to 200 BBs, and when you pull the trigger, it just releases all of them in one huge charge, and it's just the last word in close range overkill. Stupidly fun to use for some people, but they do have some purposes in games as well beyond getting the close range kill, such as being able to take out riot shield users or vehicles, depending on what the site wants to do with them. Are they extremely weighty, take up a lot of rail space, cost? Yes. Are you going to use it all the time? No. But just when you get the thrill of that one close range kill, it more than justifies it in some people's eyes. If you do want a launcher but you don't want the traditional 203 that mounts on the underside, you can actually get mini launchers. These work in the same principle, but instead of having their own secondary shell, you just front load BBs into the unit, charge it with gas, and they're so small and manageable that you can mount them onto the mounts on the underside of a pistol. So very versatile, but they do work in the same principle, just on a much smaller scale. The advantage of having a torch pretty much speaks for itself, especially if you're in a dark CQB environment. Having a torch that can light the way is just essential. A lot of CQB sites tend to be held in rundown buildings that may not have power in some sections, or they just have intentionally dark rooms anyway for close, dark CQB fighting. Being able to see where you're going and that you're not tripping over stuff is an advantage in of its own, let alone finding the other players. They can be surprisingly useful in normal engagements, however, just to blind the enemy player, and when they're trying to look in your general direction, it's quite hard for them to see where you are relative to where the torch is. Now, this is going to make a lot more sense when you're on the receiving end of that particular engagement, especially if someone's using a strobe function. It really adds to the disorientation effect of that, but a lot of sites tend not to allow the strobe function these days because it can cause epileptic fits. So make sure to check with your site before using the strobe or even trying to blind people with the torch at all, because it can be considered a bit of a dick move sometimes. You can get laser units as well, which acts as a secondary aiming device. If you've got it set up correctly, the point of a laser is that when you're pointing it downrange, it's going to shine a beam out and a little dot will appear, and wherever that dot lands is where your shot is going to go, in theory. So you wouldn't even have to sight down your gun. If you see someone and you've just got it shouldered at a resting position like here, you don't even have to bring it up to sight, you just turn, bang, that's the target gone. The disadvantage of both the laser and the torch is it can be quite apparent to the enemy team where you are. So trying to use these to your advantage can be surprisingly tricky sometimes. Red dot sights are the first point of call for most airsofters when they're considering external attachments, mainly because they're just a really cool thing to have. Some people just really love the look of them and knowing that they have a red dot. They don't even use it as aiming devices, they just like the cool factor of it that much. The purpose of a red dot, though, if you are planning to use it as intended, is to provide a much clearer sight picture on your target. When you're using iron sights, if they're especially large or obnoxious, they can actually block the target that you're looking at so much that you tend to miss little details. So getting a red dot will provide a much clearer sight picture so you can see everything around your target and not just the target itself. However, if you are going to get a red dot sight like this, make sure you invest in a little plastic shield like this here. It just mounts onto the front of your gun in front of the sight, and it prevents it from being damaged by BB fire. It's extremely easy for this to happen, especially in a CQB environment, so make sure you get that as well, otherwise this will happen to your red dot. They are quite inexpensive to replace, like most of them can go for 20 quid, but it's not fun having to replace it regardless. As well as red dots, you can also get scopes with magnified zoom levels like this one here. Now, I always tend to run a scope with magnification of some kind on my guns, even the close range stuff, because I like the ability that it provides with just scouting. So say, for example, you're in a woodland and you see something that looks vaguely like a player, you can check to see if it is a player or just a tree shaped like a player or a rock or something, or vice versa. Essentially, very useful for scouting, but also if you're tracking where your shots are landing, so say for example I'm shooting at a guy and the shots are going a bit too down and off to the left, I can see that more clearly through the scope so I know where to correct my aim to make them land on target next time. However, don't rule out the use of iron sights in general. They still have their purpose, they still can be useful, especially in close range environments. They don't rely on batteries like a red dot will, they can't be damaged by BB fire like a red dot will, so don't count an iron sight out entirely. Whilst it's not really an attachment, looking into varying capacitance of magazines can be worthwhile, especially if you're using something that runs on M4 Stanag mags, there's a lot of options available for those. High caps, the advantage of those is quite apparent. You get to carry more rounds in a single magazine, so you don't have to carry that many on your body. However, they do tend to rattle a lot when you're running, so if you want to go quiet, high caps might not be a good shout, and also they constantly need winding up in order to feed. Mid caps tend to be a lot cheaper, so you can buy them in bulk, they're quiet, and they tend to feed a lot better than high caps as well. Also, if you're thinking of going into a milsim game, a lot of them don't allow high cap mags at all, so if you plan on going to one of those, it may be worth to have a few mids on hand. If you don't like the high cap because they don't hold enough rounds, then you can actually buy some box mags which bump the capacity up from a few hundred to a few thousand rounds. So great for sustained fire, not so great for your wallet because you're going to burn through a lot more ammo and you're going to probably piss off some players with your constant never-ending firing. Because of this, a lot of CQB sites don't allow box mags, and unless your weapon is a dedicated support weapon like an M249 or M60, a lot of milsim games won't allow these either. Whilst PEQ boxes that do fire an aiming laser, much like the real steel one, exist in Airsoft, the vast majority of them are actually just hollow cases. These are used primarily for external battery mounting. So say for example the battery space in your gun is too small, too narrow, you can only fit really tiny batteries in it, or it's really hard to get them in there, then wiring your gun to an external PEQ box might allow you to fit a higher capacity battery in it that will last longer. Or maybe it's just quality of life improvement, so you don't have to constantly damage your battery by trying to force it into a small space. And that's all the attachments that I can think of that you can bolt onto an airsoft gun. The vast majority of them are there for cosmetic reasons, but being able to have something that's a little bit practical as well as tactical never really hurts anybody. Now, did I miss anything? Maybe there's an attachment that you really love so much that you couldn't live without it when you go into airsoft games. If so, then let me know in the comments section down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And until next time, this has been Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft.